everyone. Welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. I'll be your astrologer. Thanks for joining me. Back at it with another video. This is going to be a little bit more informal, and I wanted to do something a little bit different just to kind of break up the content on the channel this week. I wanted to talk to you guys and give you the top 5 tips that I have for reading relationship astrology like a pro. So this is like a fun, kind of insightful video, give you guys some food for thought when it comes to looking at synastry or composite charts. I'm gearing up for the Astrology of You and Me, a 2-part mini-series on relationship astrology. I'm going to be teaching later this month in September. And I also just wanted to create this video because between Libra season, which is quickly approaching, and also a Mercury retrograde in Libra, relationships are going to be a hot topic for the next month, and better understanding other people, because Mercury will be retrograde in the sign of Libra, which relates to partnerships, but it'll also be in opposition to Jupiter in Aries, which is what we're learning about ourselves. Such an awesome time to be learning about relationship astrology, understanding ourselves and other people better, and what we need in relationships. So that's kind of partially why I planned it for this time of the year. Now, like I said, it's going to be 2 separate sessions. They're going to be roughly 2 hours each. It's going to be on Sundays at 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern. This will be on September 18th and the 25th. It's a $75 investment, but for those of you guys who want to sign up also before the 18th, I'm actually giving this at $25 off. So the course is usually $100. I'm taking $25 off for anybody who wants to sign up in advance for these classes. It'll be live in my digital office, which I also use as a classroom. And for those of you guys who can't join at that time, if you've got something going on, if you're working, or if you're doing other things on a Sunday, or you're in other time zones, you'll be able to play that back. You'll have a live link that you can play back. So just touching on some stuff, because not everybody knows exactly like what astrologers do, what types of services they offer. It's gonna differ person to person, but probably relationship astrology is one of my favorite things. You know, I'm a Libra rising. I've got a stellium of planets in the 2nd house, which has like a very Venusian energy, and I have a 7th house moon. So I really am curious about what makes other people tick. And it's been one of my favorite things to do is to have relationship astrology sessions. So not a lot of people know I offer a variation of sessions, not just one-on-one, full or half-hour, birthday readings or solar returns or natal chart readings, but I also offer synastry and relationship compatibility sessions, and I also offer one-on-one intuitive, astrological kind of counseling sessions with partners who are looking to get a little bit more guidance in their relationship and what they're kind of going through. So like I said, it's going to differ astrologer to astrologer, but when you're seeing an astrologer professionally for relationship type consultations, everybody's going to have their own process. So I'm not here to say the right or the wrong way to do it. I'm just letting you guys know a little bit about my process and some of my techniques. Now that's like the secret sauce in astrology, right? Like a private reading, working with an astrologer. Obviously you're going to look for somebody who's got good references, they've got enough time under their belt, and they've seen enough clients to really kind of know what they're doing. And some people specialize in different types of astrology. There's people who want to talk about natal charts, who don't want to look at transits. There's people who want to do nothing but focus on asteroids. So, you want to find somebody who's going to have a background in understanding at the very least natal charts to give you a better understanding of the synastry that you may have between another person. But techniques are a big thing, and that's something that I really focus on a lot in my process. I have a whole master list of techniques and things that I've kind of learned throughout the years of studying astrology. I've had a private practice now for over 8 years, and I've been studying astrology for over 15. So, throughout that time, working with various teachers and also just kind of seeing what works and doesn't work in terms of predictions has been something that I've kind of accumulated, all of these formulas and all of these tips and tricks that I've learned. But, you know, when you're dealing with astrology readings, I think really you're going to get what you pay for across the board, right? You want to really take a look at, you know, what services they offer, how long of a session is it going to be, and what are you going to get when you're getting a relationship reading? Like I said, it's going to vary, but generally speaking, relationship or synastry compatibility type readings are going to be more expensive. Now, they're going to be more expensive because at the very least, the astrologer is looking at two separate charts, both yours and the person in question. So you can look at synastry astrology between romantic partners, people you're dating, somebody you're married to, a business partner, anyone you have a relationship with, right? General rule of thumb for me, I'm not going to look at somebody's chart unless they're giving me permission. So it's like I'm a little iffy about just pulling up anybody's chart. I'll look at general, you know, synastry, but I really want to know the exact date and time that they were born so I know that I can give you as accurate of information as possible. And while relationship astrology readings, the prices may vary, they're going to be pricier because, like I said, you're looking at two charts. You're looking at two separate people's charts. Now, in my sessions, because, you know, I've got Sun, Mercury, Pluto conjunct, I want to go like really deep into some stuff. Equally, I charge a little bit more. I charge over $300 for a synastry reading. But for me, when I'm looking at the charts, I'm not just looking at the synastry between the two. And those of you guys who are like, what's synastry? I'll get to that in a second, don't worry. I'm also looking at the natal transits to each individual chart to have a better understanding of what's unfolding in each individual person's life, to see what cycles and lessons that they're going through, how they're growing as a person, really before I even start to look at the synastry of how the two charts relate to each other. I will also look at progressions because I feel like progressions are going to paint a bigger, fuller picture of some major life changes that might be happening in that person's life. So off the bat, I'm already looking at 2 progress charts and 2 natal charts. So that's 4 charts. Then I will look at composite charts. Now I go back and forth between looking at the midpoint composite. That's basically just taking the midpoints between both charts and creating a chart. So that chart would be the relationship chart of the two. And I also look at the Davidson composite. Now there's pros and cons to both of them. I'll get into that obviously in my series, but from what I have learned, a midpoint composite chart, it's going to create aspects that we don't always see in traditional astrology transits. We'll see things like, you know, Venus in opposition to the sun and like all kinds of other things that involve like Mercury and Venus that would not traditionally happen. So it can be a little wonky, although it's important, I think, to look at it. You know, everybody's got their own, like I said, you know, recipe to looking at relationship charts. But I will also look at the Davidson, which I think is really interesting because it's going to give you the exact midpoint time, date, location of the two charts, which is likely going to be in a completely different location than where you guys were both born. And it's going to actually create that center chart, which is really interesting. Just kind of reflecting on like my relationships and what I've noticed in my life. Some relationship charts make more sense with the midpoint and some make more sense with the Davidson. I have found that both kind of have some kind of value. But in recent years, I've been studying the Davidson more, especially in like long-term relationships and cycles in relationships. And the timing is like uncanny. It's really crazy to see some of the transits play out in the Davidson chart and just see how they unfold in real life. Now, so with me, you know, we're looking at 6 different charts when you really kind of break it down. So sometimes people hem and haw over making investments into getting an astrology reading, but to be honest with you, what you're paying for is their expertise, their time, how long they've been studying, the time that they put into the charts, and the workup prior to even getting you on the phone. Me personally, I take that information in advance because I'm going to cast the charts and start looking at stuff and have a game plan before I even get on a call with someone, because it can take so long to create a report and sift through things. Now, astrology, relationship astrology in general, like what is it great for? It's great for understanding one another better and each person's individual needs and desires. And it even shines a light on their love language and how they go about really expressing their energy in relationships, what their preferences are, how they'll pursue people, and what it is that they really need when it comes to relationships in general. We can also see compatibility and whether or not people have the aspects that we look for in long-term compatibility for long-term consideration, you know, like marriage or business partnership or, you know, any kind of building with another person. Me personally, where my readings differ from other people's, I believe in free will. I believe that the stars impel, they don't compel us. We, at the end of the day, are here to look at our astrological transits and our charts to kind of see like the glory plan of what could be if we rise to the occasion. But at the end of the day, nothing is exactly set in stone. Now, we can also see where we can help work out the kinks in relationships and rough patches, especially when it comes to understanding other people. Those of you guys who have been in relationships, you know that if you really care about somebody, you want to do whatever you can do to be able to better understand them, make it work, and come to the relationship in your kind of best form. So that's what I really like about astrology. It can be so complementary to other things like couples therapy or healing or anything else that you're doing, just to kind of better understand where that person is coming from and why you may have some of the unique dynamics that you might have in a relationship. But for people who are going through rough patches and trying to understand why that's happening, looking at transits to your natal chart as well as transits to your composite charts are going to better help you understand why you're going through that, how you're growing, what the lesson is, and how long it may last. I've been doing that a lot just in my relationships with people, especially just, you know, since like last year. You know, getting married and watching Saturn cross my relationship composite, Sun and Venus, and just a lot of other aspects. It's a very complex fixed T-square in my relationship chart, and it all squares Jupiter in the 8th. And so what I've realized is that it's a lot of uncovering some of the psychological patterning and being able to kind of move through that to make big changes emotionally in terms of vulnerability, changes within the home front, but also changes in terms of how we're both adapting to stuff in regards to our career. So each individual relationship is going to have a very different chart. So we can't just base it purely just off of the synastry. Really looking at the composite chart is going to give you more insight in terms of like long-term patterns in the relationship as well. And seeing an astrologer for relationship astrology can be really helpful for selecting dates for things like marriage, moving, or relocation, especially relocated charts or astrocartography, as well as having children or planning like the perfect trip. So not a lot of people realize that like you can use astrology really for anything. If you're looking for the best time, the best location to get married, if you want to consult with an astrologer who's got background in astrocartography and find out where the best place to move together may be, if that corresponds also with really good places for you to be moving in terms of your own individual astrology. You don't want to just look at the astrocartography, you also want to look at the relocated chart to see what's going to be happening there, both personally within your own natal as well as the composite chart. So there's so many different dynamics and dimensions to astrology that I think people, the more that they learn about it and they realize that these services are possible, it may be a good idea to talk to an astrologer prior to selecting a date for getting married or choosing a long-term business partner or romantic partner. Now, I'm not really here to tell people whether or not their relationships will or will not work. I get paid to give my professional opinion, not my personal opinion. However, those of you guys who have had one-on-one sessions with me, you know that if you ask me, I will give it to you. It's just kind of the habit, I guess, the blessing and the curse of having Sun and Mercury and Pluto conjunct. All right, so let's get on with it. I'm sure a lot of you guys want to know what the 5 main tips are for being able to read relationship astrology like a pro. So those of you guys who already have a lot of background in astrology, at least basic astrology, you're gonna be able to make sense of this. So we'll kind of go through this list. So tip number 1 for me would be know your current transits, not just theirs. So many times I see clients come to me who are so fixated on transits that are going on in their relationships chart or in their partner's chart, but they're not really aware of what's going on in theirs. So they might look at, their significant other and go, oh my God, Saturn's on their moon, or Pluto's conjunct their Venus, or Saturn's in opposition to their Venus. Like, what am I going to do? And I'm really quick to kind of roll it back and say to them, it's not just about them, it's about you as well. So while one transit in one particular person's chart might look really great, in the other person's chart there might be something going on, and oftentimes we can overlook that and not realize that we are 50% of that relationship, right? 50% of that is us. So if something's not working, if there's something that's kind of going on, oftentimes that will reflect at least in one of the partner's transits in their natal transits, okay? or transits to their natal chart, excuse me. A little tongue-tied. So the other thing that like I brought up is synastry. Okay, so synastry is basically one aspect of relationship astrology. It's taking the two charts, laying them on top of each other, and seeing how they interact with one another. So some of you guys have seen me do this in my live shows. Some of you guys have seen me do this in sessions. I like to kind of flip-flop them and go back and forth and kind of see how the two charts correlate with each other. I look for patterns. I look for aspects, right? Aspects are how two planets interact or multiple planets interact with each other. And in aspects, we see things like, trines, sextiles, conjunctions, oppositions. But synastry shows us, at its most fundamental level, chemistry, right? How the chemistry is between the two people. Their compatibility, their strengths, and also their weaknesses. So we can see off the bat, do we have a Venus, conjunct Mars? Is it passionate? Do we see a Pluto conjunct the ascendant? Is it transformational? Do we see a Mercury in opposition to, Saturn? Is it hard to communicate? All of these aspects between the two charts are going to show us the pros and the cons of the relationship and what to be aware of. Tip number 2, this would be look at the big 6. Now, I don't really say big 6, big 3 all that often. Obviously, those of you guys who are kind of more into like more cultural astrology, modern day astrology, everybody's like, oh, your big 3. It's like the ASL of this generation, I guess. The big 3 being your sun, moon, and rising, right? But the big 6 includes also Mars, Venus, and Mercury. So here's the way that I see it. Obviously, the sun, the moon, the rising are going to give you an idea of kind of more or less your direction in life, how you come across to other people, how you are at an emotional level. But Mars, Venus, and Mercury are exceptionally important, especially when it comes to relations to others. Now, Venus is always going to be about our preferences, right? What we're open to, how we harmonize with other people, the scents, the colors that we like, the way that we may portray ourselves. And Mars is going to deal more so with sex, vitality, passion, desire, but also aggressiveness. So understanding each individual partner's Mars and Venus sign and also how that relates to the gender that they identify with is going to show us how they exude that energy. If you are a woman and you identify as a woman, looking at your Venus sign is going to be very important because it's going to show the way that you carry your feminine energy. Mars may be more so similar to the type of men that you go after. And on the flip side, for men who identify as men, you're going to be wanting to look at your Mars sign because that's going to show how you carry that masculine energy, how you direct that energy in life, how you may be sexually in the bedroom. But Venus may be what you're ultimately attracted to. And with men also, we look at the moon because the moon might relate more to the wife or the woman that they end up committing to. It's very similar sometimes to the mother versus Venus, which might be more like a girlfriend energy or what they're attracted to. Now, I don't want to get too much into like technical stuff. I'm going to save that more for the course, but understanding these, especially how it relates to one another, is going to give us a more fuller picture of whether or not we're compatible. Just basing compatibility off of sun signs, honestly, is not good astrology. And it doesn't encourage us to learn more about the various 12 archetypes and the different parts of our chart that we need to know to get a fuller or better understanding. Now, when we look at Mercury, because I don't know about you guys, but I think the key to a good relationship is communication. Mercury is also going to show where we relay ideas, how we exchange, how we communicate. And I think that's also very important. Just kind of riffing briefly off of one other planet that I would look at also would be Saturn. In some situations, Saturn can be very detrimental. In other situations, Saturn can be the glue that holds two people together. So really, it's going to come down to aspects. But generally speaking, for those of you guys who have a background, we know that trines are generally free-flowing. For the most part, they're positive. They're of the energy of Jupiter, although we can see some situations where things flow a little too much. We see conjunctions, which are very powerful, one of the most powerful aspects in astrology, which represents a fusion, especially if you have this in synastry. It's very significant. And squares, which relate to pressure or intensity and sometimes conflict. But in some situations, like Venus-Mars squares can actually be like that sexual tension and that playfulness that like keeps the relationship alive, and it kind of keeps things like moving and shaking. Other things that we look at also are some of the asteroids relating to love. I really like to look at Juno. I also like to look at Lilith to have a better understanding of like relationship, partnership, long-term commitment versus intimacy, sex, and desire, as well as the nodes in synastry. And where the South Node can sometimes point to karmic relationships, soulmates, where we've done this dance before, and the North Node is bringing people into our life that are destined to help us become what we're here to become. Number 3 would be enhance your synastry by digging deeper into the composite chart. So, like I said, I work personally with 2 different types of composite charts. I like looking at the midpoint, which is going to give the midpoint between the 2 charts, and also the Davidson. When I say dig deeper, without giving away all the secret sauce, let's just put it this way. The more charts you have to work with, the more charts you have to compare. So comparing a composite chart to a natal can be interesting. Comparing a progressed chart to your partner's natal can be interesting. I remember looking back in, the last several years, like my husband had eclipses and retrogrades over his Mars in the 7th house. And at the time where we reconnected from the past, because we knew each other 8 or 9 years ago, my progressed moon was coming into conjunction with his Mars right around the time that we were reconnecting. So you wouldn't necessarily know that looking at my natal transits or my natal placements, because I have nothing in Gemini, but it was coming into conjunction with his Mars in his 7th house, and that ended up being his wife. So the more charts that we have to look at, the deeper that we go down the astrological kind of like rabbit hole in comparing, we start to notice these patterns and these reoccurring sequences that might reinforce and make us feel more confident with kind of seeing what direction that a relationship might go in, or it'll just keep bringing up the same patterns in terms of how you guys relate to one another. But I would encourage you guys to definitely look beyond synastry, because synastry is great. I've seen some amazing synastry charts, and then I've seen some total train wreck composite charts. And on the flip side, I've seen some very difficult synastry, and I've seen some really great composites. Those are some of my favorite ones, especially because when you think about like oppositions and squares, we know, especially in astrology, that can actually bring very significant people into our life that help us evolve and change. We see this a lot through like looking at the vertex in astrology, sometimes also looking at midpoints. So number 4 for me would also be looking at midpoints, looking at midpoints. And if you guys don't know what that is, most astrological software, good software, is going to be able to give you a midpoint list. This is essentially giving you the midpoints of your planets. Now, there's a whole laundry list of ones that I look at. I think the number 1 most important one that I'll list here is the sun-moon midpoint. So that is going to be finding the center point, degree, and sign based off of where your sun and your moon is. That is the divine masculine and feminine energy. That is harmonizing conscious and unconscious, male and female, bringing those 2 together. Even if we're looking at same-sex relationships, the sun-moon midpoint is going to talk a lot about where we're unifying the physical and the soul. Okay, let's just leave it at that. So looking at your sun-moon midpoint, you're going to be able to see, okay, does my partner have a planet that's conjunct that? Pretty important. Do they have a planet that squares that? Also pretty important. Just kind of going off of what I've seen in many times in charts, midpoints are things that are invisible. You have to have the list or know how to kind of spot them to be able to kind of pick it up if you're well versed enough in terms of just knowing, about the signs and the degrees, and that there is essentially, 0 to 29 degrees of each sign. You can kind of calculate it mentally. But having a good software that can cast that and give that to you is really going to enhance your readings, because you can look at the midpoints in terms of synastry as well as transits, and that's going to show you a lot about impending relationships, even if you don't have somebody in your life currently. And number 4 would be, I guess, I don't know if that was 3 or 4. This might end up being 6. Oh well. Building off of that, I guess I should say, transits to those points that may be affecting that. So, you can look at the composites and what's kind of happening to that. And then number 5 would be looking at transits to both the composite chart, So that would be kind of like the finale, right? I would look at each individual transit, look at the progressions, look at the synastry, then look at the composite chart. And I want to look at transits, transiting planets in the sky to our composite chart and kind of see what's happening. You know, do we have a transit Saturn that's coming into conjunction with a Venus? Do we have a Jupiter crossing the ascendant? Do we have a Pluto conjuncting the moon? If you are well versed enough in understanding transits in a natal chart, or at the very least what planets mean, you can kind of better understand as a planet comes into an aspect with one of your composite chart planets, what might manifest. In some situations, Saturn crossing the ascendant can be a breakup, but it can also be a strengthening. You know, Saturn conjuncting Venus can be some real difficult lessons in love, but it can also materialize as engagements or getting married. So it really depends on each individual chart. But one thing that I'll say on top of this, I guess this would be kind of like 5.5 or 6. In a personal chart, you also can look at your progressed placements. So like progressed Venus, if progressed Venus is changing signs, if it's at a critical degree, if you're having a progressed planet coming into conjunction with your 7th house, or just looking at like the actual lunar phase that might be happening in your chart, like, you know, a full moon lunar phase happening between the sun and the moon in the 1st and the 7th house axis can be very significant. Really, the list goes on. But this is just some food for thought on how to really enhance your astrological practice. If you're somebody who is wanting to expand beyond just, you know, basic astrology, if you're wanting to venture into transits, or if you're wanting to learn more about relationships, this can be an excellent way to start kind of doing more work on that and like learning more. You know, I always tell my students, the more that you're working with charts, the more that you're going to be able to learn. So getting your hands on a number of charts, or studying famous people's charts, or looking at families' charts, or people in your life, the more that you're going to start to kind of pick some of this stuff up. As always, you want to have a foundational understanding of astrology, especially when it comes to working with the language. For those of you guys who want to know more, if you want to learn more, I actually have a Beginner's Astrology 101 course on my website. It's over 18 hours of lecture, 8 different classes with homework, and also a final exam to show that you've completed Astro 101 at the basic level. And if you want to learn more, right, about relationship astrology, about synastry, composites, if you want to learn these techniques and understand others and partners better, whether that's in your own life, or maybe you're looking to save a little bit of money because you can't really afford to go and talk to an astrologer and spend a couple $100. Maybe you just want to be able to learn some of these techniques so you can integrate it into your own practice if you are a practicing astrologer, and get a better grasp of compatibility and identifying long-term patterns in relationships. Join my course. I'd be happy to have you. Once again, it is going to be $25 off if you sign up before the 18th, and that'll be a $75 investment. Part 1 is going to include synastry aspects, how they play out in relationships, understanding compatibility beyond sun signs, karmic indicators, and soulmate markers, pinpointing love languages using Venus and Mars, sexual, financial, emotional, and intellectual compatibility, spotting red flags in synastry, and relationship asteroids. A week later, we are going to go into part 2, which is all going to be about composites and relationship timing. We'll take a look at midpoint and Davidson composite charts, and I'll show you guys the difference between the two. We're going to learn how to read a composite chart and relationship timing in transits in a composite chart. Solar and Venus returns are something I will touch on, as well as a technique that you can use to learn more about your love life for the year ahead by looking at those returns. Working with eclipses, how to identify relationship strength and weaknesses, and some marriage and relationship timing indicators. So it's a lot. This is actually just a small part of what I'm going to be including in my Astro 201 or 301. I haven't quite decided which one this is going to go into yet. But let me know, is this something that you're interested in? How are you guys faring with some of these Libra transits already? Are you starting to have questions about relationships? You can always join me live on Saturdays. I'm always doing live readings. We alternate between tarot and astrology. This week we're going to be doing astrology, and I do offer very, basic kind of like mini readings. And if you want to do a quick question, it's always $40 donation or $65 if you have questions about synastry. So if you want to kind of see me do this live, if you want to hang out on a Saturday night, I'd be happy to spend it with you guys. I'll be back on Thursday. I'm going to do a follow-up to the Mercury retrograde in Libra. We talked a little bit about a week or two ago, previewing all of the transits. I want to go a little bit deeper and talk to you guys about how it's going to affect the 12 signs, so I will be back with that on Thursday. Otherwise, I hope you guys are doing well. If you are still enjoying your holiday weekend, keep enjoying it. Those of you guys who are back to work, I hope it's going well. Okay, guys, until next time, I'll see all of you very soon. Take care.